Alright, man. I think it's about time I address this. You know, when it comes to NASCAR and how it separates itself from other sports, the first thing that, or one of the first things that comes to mind, especially as of recently, is the secrecy behind it and how every matter inside the sport is dealt with behind closed doors. NASCAR is just so secretive of a sport in general. Now, in some cases, it doesn't really matter to me. For example, you look at the contract negotiations. 1 year, when a driver gets signed, they always say, "Oh, it's this driver got signed to a 1 year extension," or if it's for many years, it's a multi-year extension. Very rarely do they say like it's gonna be a 2 year or a 5 year contract. Very rarely do they say. It's also very rarely if it's like a driver option or a team option. That contract has a clauses behind it. It doesn't really, that stuff doesn't really get reported. It's something that is much of a closed door, and because of that, we don't know the actual driver salaries. Unlike compared to a sport like the MLB or the NFL or the NBA, where salaries are very public. I think even in Formula One, they even show the drivers that I believe when Max Verstappen he signed his deal, which was a massive deal. He was like the highest paid Formula One driver. I think they said. I think they had the exact amount. I don't quite get it because it's kind of escaping my mind, but they reported the exact amount that Verstappen's contract was worth, and you don't see that with NASCAR drivers nowadays, and it's because salary in NASCAR, salary money, it's not that big of a deal because NASCAR is a sport that lives and dies by sponsorships. And if a driver gets signed to a team, a driver signs a contract with a team, it's gonna be because of sponsorship, because some sponsorship deal, something that they brought to the table. But then we have the stuff that really pisses me off, that NASCAR is just so secretive about, and there's no reason they should be. These penalty reports. Most recently, there was this piece of news that came out that made a ton of headlines in the NASCAR world. It's obviously the Keselowski penalty. And what really pisses me off is how NASCAR doesn't release the details. They just say Keselowski was penalized because it was found during their research and development teardown of the car that they just found illegal modifications to spec parts, but they don't specify which. They just say it in general terms, but they don't specify what happened. You look at Bob Pockrass, he tweeted something about like the body at the rear of the car. It was something wrong with that. That's where the illegal modifications were found. But the fact of the matter is, they're not informing us about it. NASCAR just keeps this information about penalties behind closed doors. Just tell us what they did. Just tell us what they did and what parts they messed up with, so we can understand what RFK Racing did wrong. But no, NASCAR just doesn't release any public reports. They just release their penalty reports and say, "Oh, this thing was penalized because of this, this, and this," but they don't get into very specific terms. They just say the penalty, but they do not say what they found that led to the penalty. And NASCAR has always been secretive with issues like this for no reason. Why don't they release the full penalty report when it happens with just detailed evidence and stuff like that? As a matter of fact, why doesn't NASCAR release the entire rulebook like other sports leagues around the world do? Is it because they fear that that the rulebook is gonna get too specific? Bro, look at the MLB rulebook or the NBA rulebook. It gets very, very specific. That shouldn't be a problem for for NASCAR. We as fans will eventually are gonna understand that. And of course, this is gonna lead to conspiracy theories and just misinformation. You're already looking at the Keselowski fans on social media saying that, oh, they've had it out for him ever since the wheel incident at the Daytona 500, which is of course not true. The penalty has nothing to do with this. It had nothing to do with something with a race that happened a month ago. This was in regards to the Atlanta race. The car that was taken to R&D, the Keselowski car, was the same car that he ran in Atlanta. The car that he scored a top 15 finish with. His car was, what's more, his car was selected at random after the Atlanta race. Like, if any other car was selected, this will be a non-conversation. Like, if, for example, let's just say Ryan Blaney's car. If Blaney's car was selected for R&D and Blaney's car was okay, this will be a non-conversation basically. This is just so this claim of NASCAR just having it out for Keselowski since the Daytona 500 is just so baseless. Now it sucks that it happened to. Now of course it sucks that it happened to him, but this is sending a huge message to the rest of the field that NASCAR isn't playing around this year with this Gen 7 car. Now I don't know if there were any other teams that were doing this, like RFK Racing were. But if they were, and they find out about this, they just gotta be breathing a huge sigh of relief, because if it wasn't Keselowski and it could have been potentially them in their place, and then we'll be having this same conversation. They will be having just a similar conversation of, man, NASCAR isn't playing around this year with this Gen 7 car. Now, like I said, this also begs the question of whether RFK was the only team that was modifying spec parts and they just happened to be the ones getting caught. It wouldn't surprise me if it was the case, because there's this old saying in NASCAR, if you ain't cheating, you ain't winning. Now, of course, it sounds dumb to mess with the parts when there is a huge points penalty at play, but maybe that Daytona 5, but maybe in RFK's situation, the Daytona 500 with it got it into their heads that they could get away with a little more than what they originally thought. NASCAR, they confiscated the wheels to see if everything was okay. Then RFK said, then they found out that no, they modified the wheels, but it was to restore them back to their original like tolerance stuff, and NASCAR just let it slide, and ever since then, like RFK, they thought they could basically cheat the system, and they thought they could do it a second time. I guess they didn't. Maybe they got through post-race inspection, and I know that Bob Pockrass also tweeted out that no penalties can come from the R&D stuff, but then again, this is the Gen 7 car, and we gotta understand that this is a lot of uncharted territory. NASCAR is gonna have to make a lot of changes to their rules. This is basically very, very unprecedented, because usually no penalties come out from R&D teardown. But again, if they find out that during the teardown that they modified illegally a spec part from an exclusive vendor like NASCAR, they released this penalty report before the season began, like a few weeks before the season began. They released this penalty report, and it was just filled with very harsh penalties. And I guess, once again, I don't care what you think about this, whether you feel bad for RFK or not. It was good on NASCAR for stepping up and creating a new precedent with this next-gen car too. You had to send a message early on in the season. RFK was the first team to be snake bit by this. Keselowski was the first driver to suffer the consequences of this. So what does this mean for Brad Keselowski now? Of course, this is 100 points. He gets hit with a big hammer, yikes. As a matter of fact, I think this is the largest points penalty in NASCAR history. Now that I think about it, when I take into account like points formats and stuff like that, because objectively speaking, the largest amount of points deducted from a penalty was Carl Long back in 2009, but that was under the Latford Winston Cup points format that was used until 2010. So where winning a race gave you up to 195 points. So Carl Long, he basically got that 200 points are basically worth like a little, just a smidge over a race worth of points. Brad Keselowski, on the other hand, he got penalized 100 points in an era where the maximum number of points you can get for winning a race and winning both stages is 60 points. And he got penalized 100 of those things. That's like being penalized 300 points in the Winston Cup era. Like, if you guys understand what I mean, I think this is the largest points penalty in NASCAR history. And also, if he were to make the playoffs, I don't know if he will now, but if he somehow miraculously were to make it, he will start with -10 playoff points. Assuming he doesn't earn any playoff points, he's going to start with 2,000 minus 10. That's going to be 1,990 points. So he's going to be starting with less than 2,000 championship points when the playoffs begin, if, again, assuming if Keselowski somehow miraculously makes the playoffs. So this penalty also drops Keselowski from 16th all the way down to 35th in points, which ranks him as the worst among full-time drivers. And he's also below Devert Regan and Garrett Smithley, who are both part-time drivers, and also 1 point ahead of Greg Biffle, who is another part-time driver. Essentially, he's in a must-win situation now. He won't be able to make up that huge deficit to return to the playoff bubble, since RFK is a mid-pack team, and in order for him to make it back into to claw his way back into the top 16, he's gonna have to score an average of 30 points per race, and that's basically gonna be like a top 10 per race. Like, you really think Keselowski is gonna score like 21 top 10s in every race, one top 10 for every race? That's like 21 top 10s. I don't think he will, especially with how crazy and insane this season has been. I don't think this hill just got a whole lot tougher to climb for Brad. Now, I do think he can make it to the top 13 points. So again, there are only 32 full-time drivers, so getting to the top 13 points is not that hard. I believe that by race like 12 or 13 of the regular season, he's gonna be, at the latest, he's gonna be back in the top 30. But getting that win or appealing the penalty, and again, that's the crazy part. NASCAR can still somehow, they're still somehow given the chance to appeal to RFK, which of course I believe they're gonna do it, because they managed to get away with the Daytona 500. So I don't think they're gonna let this. They're gonna stand by this and watch their playoff hopes crumble away after starting the year so great with so many expectations, sweeping the Daytona duels. They don't want their season to devolve into another just clawing back to the top for this team. They were a team that was really on the rise, along with 2311 and Trackhouse. So gonna be interesting to see how they proceed moving forward. But if I were to guess, I don't think they're going to I don't think their appeal is gonna work. I think those penalties are going to be upheld in the ruling, in the final ruling, and even then, regardless of what happens, they gotta start. They gotta start bringing their A game to every race, and even if and again, even if they somehow make it to the playoffs, every point matters. And starting the season with a -10 playoff points with less than 2,000 points, most likely. Then again, assuming Keselowski doesn't get any championship points, but starting the season with -10 playoff points, that's gonna be another hill that they're gonna have to climb. So this playoff picture just got a lot. It just opened up once again. So this most likely eliminates. If I was a betting guy, I would most likely eliminate Keselowski from the playoffs like right now, because outside of Talladega and Daytona and Atlanta, there's just no shot I can see. There's just no shot I can see Keselowski like making it in on points. He's gonna think about winning now, for sure.